Hello again, it's Tom here, and let's get right to the second chapter of Gunnerkrigg Court, Schoolyard Myths. In this chapter we see a lot of the other characters in the comic, in particular Kat, who I very much consider the second main character rather than a secondary character to Annie. And we also see some of the students and the teachers, in particular Mrs. Donlan, who turns out to be Kat's mom. It happens to be named after one of my favourite teachers back in school. We also see Winsbury for the first time, or Willie Winsbury, also named after a song that I really like. And it also gives us a way of seeing how Annie would confront somebody who was actively trying to agitate her just by staring them down. So on this page, it's the first time Annie and Kat meet. I forgot to mention, I guess, that Annie's full name is Antimony, and this is where Kat starts to call her Annie, so it's almost as if Kat has given her name Annie. And Katerina is Katerina Donlan. You also see John there up in the top panel, the guy with the brown hair. So we see a few of the classes. I didn't really want to focus too much on watching the students in class, because I figured for the large part a lot of the classes would be just your usual school subjects, and the homework that the super boring teacher, who again is never in the comic, is a chance for Annie to show that she seems to have some knowledge about mythological figures. Annie and Kat head off to the library, and for some reason it looks like they don't have a lot of mythological books, or books on mythology. This is because Gunnerkrigg is more of a school of science, and this is where we start to see that a lot of the mythological stuff that the court confronts is hidden away, in this case relegated to an old library. Now, this page is pretty interesting because people still talk about these paintings down at the bottom here. And originally, they were a reference to a movie that I saw when I used to live in America as a kid. And I always had this image of a scene in the movie where the characters saw these paintings with footprints walking into them. And in the movie itself, it had been known that some children had escaped into the paintings and never came back. And I sort of wanted to do something similar to that, but in the end I ended up cutting it because it was something that I was setting up to come back a lot later, but I felt that it was just I was trying to crowbar something into the comic that ultimately didn't really have much need. The movie itself was a 1985 movie called The Peanut Butter Solution, and it took me a long time of searching on the internet to try and find it because searching for keywords like movie, painting, footprints didn't really bring up very much. So they go into the larger library. Annie gives another chance of showing that she's kind of a nerdlinger, talking about her mythological stuff. And I didn't want Kat to be the character that's always questioning the main character, and where Annie says, oh, this is a Cretan labyrinth. I didn't want Kat to say, well, what's that? I've never heard of that before. Kat knows what a labyrinth is, and I sort of wanted to set up that relationship whereby they're both knowledgeable characters. They might be knowledgeable on different things, but I didn't want this newer character to seem like she was leaning on the main character for explanation and basically tagging along. And here we see some of Annie's backstory starting to come to light, and this is all stuff that I'd decided upon before starting the comic, just vaguely, but here I was starting to solidify things like the fact that Annie came from a hospital, and that she might have had a bit of trauma in her past. And again, this is setting up a long-running theme that goes throughout the comic. And another theme that runs throughout the comic is coming across a big scary monster who seems a lot more scary at first than he actually is. And we see Basil for the first time. Basil the Minotaur is living in a timeshare in the court. And so, of course, they bring him back to class as their homework. And here up on the top panel, we see Janet, John, Winsbury again, and Path for the first time. And so they get Basil to tell his version of the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. And again, that's another long-running sort of theme of the comic, whereby stories they evolve and change over time, and depending on the perspective, they can take on a whole different meaning, especially depending on who's telling the story. And that's it. And here is the next bonus page where we're just explaining how the accommodation works. I know that I wanted to change the accommodation every year, but I also knew that I wanted the accommodation to be quite strange year on year. And this was just a very simple design that I knocked up in 3D and used as reference for drawing their bunks. And what is this? Anyway, that's chapter 2. Thanks for listening. Come back for chapter 3, Renardine.